All right, it's your friends Kelly and Bob. We're back for time, and it's time for forgiveness. Another amazing conversation we're bringing you today. So get pumped because you're going to love what we get into in our conversation. And if you're repeating guests on Time for Forgiveness, we welcome you back. We love that you're here, and we know you're making an investment of your time and energy to be with us today, and we don't take that lightly. If you're new to our community, welcome to the family, and we love having you here at Time for Forgiveness. And if you want to share this with anybody, and based on today's conversation, everyone can benefit from this conversation we're going to have with our guest speaker today. So make sure you're sharing this through your communities and people you know and care about, because they're going to want to hear this message. And today we're welcoming Bob Proctor to the show. Brian, welcome to Time for Forgiveness.
Thanks, Bob. And thanks, Kelly. It is great to be here with the two of you, and it's really good to see you both.
And if you don't recognize that name, Brian, so Brian was born in 1961, the same year his legendary father, Bob Proctor, was given the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which began his dad's legacy of over 60 years working with people on mindset, coaching, strategy, and personal development. And he was a legend. Brian, as you know, one of our great mentors and coaches and teachers that we had. Kelly and I had the blessing to know Bob for about 6 years and get to know you as well. And it changed our life, and it put us on a new course. I know we wouldn't be here today without your dad, Brian. And it's just such a honor to have you on and just get into a conversation with you today. And honey, what do you want to say about your time with Bob? Because I know he impacted you in a great way too.
Well, I hope we all share, there were so many takeaways, but maybe the one that's really impacted our lives the most and later in the conversation. But I think the difference with your dad, he had such a energy to him, but it's one thing to inspire someone, it's another to transform someone. And he was able to transform anyone that was willing and open because he was a teacher. And it's very few that you come across that type of teacher. And he was so passionate about making a difference in people's lives, and he certainly did in ours.
Yeah, so Brian, today you are the co-founder of Kelly Proctor Company, LLC, an organization that you created with your wife, Corey Kelly Proctor. And your mission is to carry on basically the legacy, and now you're a big part of that, empowering people to live their best life by leaning into simple yet profound strategies. And I love that. You're not teaching techniques. In other words, you're teaching strategies that work, and you know they work because they're time tested and they're proven. And so I'm going to ask the first question if it's okay.
Sure.
Okay. So Brian, in your book, and we want to talk about your second book that just came out last fall, but I have the book, My Father Knew the Secret, Growing Up with Bob Proctor. And on page 35, you say here, do your part and commit to a life of curiosity and learning. Question the way you reflexively do things. I love this. Our reactions and responses are likely the paradigms that are part of our belief system, which may be an assumed truth. And so when we talk about, obviously on our show here, Brian, we get into this topic of forgiveness, and we're all about, Kelly and I are all about teaching the power and the science behind making the decision to forgive and moving from an emotional state of unforgiveness, resentment to forgiveness. And so when we talk about forgiveness, obviously it can be, when you talk about reflexivity, it's just what we do. It's probably based on what we saw growing up, right? Did we were in an environment where our parents forgave? Did we hear, "We're sorry, please forgive me," these types of things? You want to talk about that from your understanding and how you teach around this, this paradigm of we just do things because it's just an auto response, in other words.
Yeah, it's something that I really kind of learned growing up. And I'll tell you that it's it's funny being here doing this with you today. As you know, I'm actually in my father's studio,
Right.
and this is it's a really special place to be. And the one thing I learned from him growing up is that so often we we almost react to things when something happens to us or somebody does something to us or somebody says something to us, that we jump and react right away. And sometimes we say things that we maybe don't really mean. But because we've just reacted so quickly, we can escalate things into a bad place. And something I learned from Dad is that sometimes when things happen to us, we need to take a step back and just sit on it for a minute before you respond. And if we respond in a good way, that reflexivity doesn't seem to happen. And we don't escalate things maybe into a space that, you have a tough time forgiving. Things happen that, or things were said that you have a tough time letting go of. And sometimes if we sit back and just respond and do it in a kind way, we can stop we can stop things from happening that we even need to be forgiven for, because we've actually thought about it before we speak something. And that's really something that I learned from him over my lifetime. And I know it's made a difference for me. I really do.
Well, Brian, you had said in the book that you had learned at a very young age how to control your emotions. And most people in a conversation will just say, well, I can't do that. I wasn't taught that. I can't control my emotions. What would you say to them would be like a simple first step to start possibly responding instead of reacting?
Well, the first step is, you want to ask yourself, how is that serving you? If you just automatically react to things, how you change that is simply stepping back a little bit. If somebody says something, some people can trigger us, let's face it, and some people will say things that get our guard up. And if we can take, sometimes it's just a matter of a fraction of a couple of seconds to sit back before we say something back, we can reason with ourselves a better response. Most people just automatically snap back. And I always learn that if you just take sometimes even just that 1 second pause, your response will be different. And that's where you start. You start by just giving yourself pause before you say anything. You might not be great at it right away, and you may still react. But sometimes if you take that little pause, you'll catch yourself not saying things that could escalate it or make things worse a lot more often than not. And that's where you start. You just start. It's with awareness. We need to become aware when we're reacting to somebody or to whatever they're doing to us. And it's in that it is in that brief second that we sit back and think about it that we can create all the difference in our life and in the way we interact with anybody.
Hmm.
And Brian, your dad was beloved all over the world, had fans all over the world, transformed lives for over 60 years all over the world. And there were so many people that just wanted to spend time with him.
Yeah.
And so he was such a unique person. And what you said was true, like in terms of what he would tell Kelly and I, awareness is everything.
Yeah.
Awareness. Without awareness, we can't make the change. But what would you say, just obviously growing up with your dad, you observed him virtually every day. What was one or two of his personality characteristics that you, as you became older, you became aware that, my dad's different in this respect. Like he's got
Right.
a unique ability to handle this or do that. And I'm thinking more around handling difficult people. What was it that made your dad so special in that regard?
I can think oftentimes, I mean, sitting where I'm sitting now, I look out to the backyard and I can remember many times sitting in the backyard with him having conversations. And so often things would happen that were not great. Let's face it, none of us are immune from adversity. Bad things can happen and
Mm-hmm.
bad things do happen. But it's how we respond to those things that make all the difference in the world. And as you both know, I mean, my father loved the two of you, and you'll recognize this phrase right away. The one thing he would say whenever anything bad happened, or if he was working with somebody that was giving him a tough time, he would just, God, I can remember even asking him about this. He would just say, "It is what it is." That's it. He would say, "It is what it is." And then he would carry on and just look for the good in it. He always was looking for the good in a situation. He would just like, "It is what it is." We can't control other people, what they're going to do, what they're going to say, but we can control how we're going to respond to it. And he knew that at a deep level. And that whole phrase, it is what it is, was that knowing, really, as simple as that is, at a deep level, and
Mhm.
recognizing that it is what it is. And then he would just look for the good in the situation and focus on the good. That was the trick.
But I think, I mean, it seems so simple when you think about, well, he couldn't change it. But we are so conditioned to start the loop going of what should I have done? What could I have done? How could instead of just accepting it is what it is and I can't
Right.
change it. But one of the things in the book that is just a sentence that caught my attention, it had said most breakthroughs happen by violating logic. And
Mhm.
we are so, I think, trapped sometimes with logic. We've been conditioned that way. But in a way, it's thinking negative. And so, where do you think the first step would be to where we could begin to possibly violate and let go of logic?
The first step is in our thoughts. It really is. I think so many people let their current circumstances, their outside environment dictate how they feel, dictate how they respond, dictate what they think life is going to bring to them. And unfortunately, they have it backwards. Everything, if we want to change in anything at all, we need to change the way we're thinking. And it starts with our thoughts. If we want to change our outside world, if we want to change our results, we have to change it in here first. If we can change it here first, everything else will change. And if we can change our thoughts around something, a situation, that is when we can change how that situation shows up in our life. So it really starts with our thoughts.
Well, I want to keep going with this. I had read that you had mentioned that your dad said most people overcomplicate things.
Mhm.
And I think forgiveness can be a really complicating thing when we tell ourselves it's very complicating. But he also went further to say it's possibly a way that it's a diversion from actually going in and doing the work on ourselves.
Right.
Um, if someone's listening and they're like, well, I'm not overcomplicating, what could that look like in someone's life?
Well, I think a lot of times we overthink things, and in my opinion, that is overcomplicating. We overthink a situation, or we let ourselves create a scenario that's even more extreme than what it is. We think somebody really means this, or they're really thinking that, and we don't actually know. So we're overcomplicating it. We're creating something that's possibly not even existing. And if we can control the way we look at something, the way we feel around something, and how we respond and react, that's the beginning of it. I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to kindness. If we can always come from a kind place and a kind heart, no matter what anybody does around us, no matter what they're doing, we can alter our world. That's it. And if we can alter our world, we will start to alter the worlds of us, those people that are around us. And that's where it really starts. We can't fight somebody else's reality. And forgiveness is such a powerful word, and it's such a difficult word to get through sometimes based on different situations. But I can remember actually writing a piece of that book, My Father Knew the Secret, around forgiveness. And I remember even where I was sitting, and I was talking to my father about it. He knew I was writing the book. It was before he passed away. And I remember asking him about forgiveness. And I wanted his thoughts on it. And he basically said to me, he says, Brian, forgiveness is really for you. It's not for the other person. It's not for the person that's harmed you. We can't control what they're going to do, what they're going to think, but we do have control over how we feel and think. And when you can let it go and release it, you're freeing yourself. He had many situations where he had business partners or people that he worked with that caused him harm. He never stayed in resentment around those situations. He forgave. Now, he didn't work with them again,
Mhm.
and they were gone out of his life. He released them from his life, but he did not let what they did to him become a part of who he was and hold him down. And that was the key. I really got that from him. It's releasing it so that you feel better. Because when you're hanging on to resentment, the only person you're hurting is yourself. It really is. It's not doing you any good. So his opinion was that we need to release that for our own well-being. It's not to say the harm didn't happen or something didn't occur, but it's not living in that and letting it ruminate in our thoughts over and over and over. It's about releasing it so we can carry on and be the best version of us.
Yeah, Brian, and when you say this, the conditioning, as Kelly alluded to, and I know that's how I was conditioned growing up in an Italian family, is you just reacted. Something
Right.
happened and it just went from 0 to 10 in 60 seconds. And it was the other person was always doing it to me. And that's how we justified the response or the reaction.
Right.
And so it's just so commonplace. And I remember, I know Kelly and I, because I used to, and I asked you this not too long ago. I said, what was the one trait about Bob, your dad, that you just loved? And Kelly said, it's that Bob always found the best in everything and everybody.
Yeah.
And when you're in Bob's presence, just like I feel it with you right now, and you remind me so much of your dad, is just you felt better about yourself just being
Mhm.
with him. And that was
Mhm.
such a special gift that he gave everybody all the time, no matter who you were. It was
Yeah.
just you were important, even if it was for 20 seconds of interacting with your dad, you felt better about yourself. And that was such a beautiful thing that he was so gifted at giving people.
It really is. You know, there's one thing that he shared this to me with me when I was a young boy, and it's something I've always used. He says, you can be in front of somebody that you don't particularly even like, but you can always find something good about them. And he says you
Mm.
compliment them and you talk about what you find good in them.
Mhm.
And you can find the good in anything if you look for it. That's really the key. And that's my father wasn't, I mean, you both know he was an expert at that. He could make anybody feel comfortable, feel seen, feel heard. And that's a gift. And that will really get you on in the world.
I think obviously remember Bob saying that so many times, but then he would also say, if you're not looking or finding the good, why don't you check your own attitude? And I mean, it was a great big idea for me to accept, because I would love for you to then share with the audience, like, how do you check in on your own attitude? What does that look like for you, Brian?
Well, I think, you know, for me, it's just a matter of how are you looking at anything? Are you looking at things from a grateful heart? That's the key. That's how you check in with yourself. And if you're not looking at things from a place of gratitude, you're not looking from a grateful heart, then it's time to do a recheck, I guess, for lack of better words. And you'll know right away. Are you looking at things like, oh, this is great, or are you looking how terrible this is? And if you're looking at how bad things are, it's time to realign. You know, one of the things I learned from him, and it's a simple exercise that most people really discard easily, is a practice of gratitude. You know, he had, and I know I have, every morning, I have a gratitude journal, and I write in it every morning. I write out what I'm grateful for, and that's Dad did the same thing. And when you can come from a place of gratitude, even when times are tough, you know, I think I said earlier, none of us are immune from adversity. Sometimes we have tough things happening. But if we can take the time to sit back and recheck our thoughts and focus on what are we grateful for? What's good in our life? You will start to see better around you and you will start to attract better into your life. That's really the first step in checking what your attitude is and what are you focused on.
You know, Brian, but how do you respond when you're coaching people that say, well, I'll do that when? I'll do that when the money shows up. I'll do that when this person says they're sorry. I'll do that when my boss recognizes me for the contribution I'm making here. I mean, how do you respond? You know, it's like, and obviously, if you're waiting for those things or circumstances to happen, it doesn't work that way. But what would you add to that?
You know, I think unfortunately, a lot of people live that way. And whether it's forgiveness, whether it's something they're going after, they're waiting for that big thing to happen, that change before they change.
Hmm.
And they've got it backwards. You know, Dad always talked that we need to change from inside first if we want our outside world to change. If we let our outside world and what's happening dictate how we show up, it's always going to be the same. or it might change a little bit, but nothing dramatic is going to happen. If we want that big thing to happen, it starts with our thinking. And if we can start to think of where do I want to be, and then step into what one little thing can I do today to get me one step closer to there, that's how we start to change our outside world. It starts from in here first.
One of the biggest ways that I was able to change my outside world, because early on in my life, it was really just wanting people to like you. And so you were just so nice, so nice. And you really quieted your voice just so you could accommodate, so no one else was uncomfortable. But then there was some resentment because you possibly started to think, I wonder what they think of me and why would they say that? And it was just exhausting. And I remember your dad saying, Kelly, what they think of you is none of your business. Your only business is what you think of you. And I got to a space that I really liked me. And I really look back now and, there's very few times that I am really struggling to forgive because I'm in such a good place with me. That was one of the greatest lessons that I think I learned from your dad. And I think when people are struggling with forgiveness, they're holding on to maybe what someone said about them, or maybe they think someone thinks that way about them, and it's not even true.
Okay, so let me, when you say, now I really like me, what would you tell our audience? What would be one thing that they could go to work on right now that would help them to start liking themselves better, growing their self-image?
Well, there were several things that I learned with your dad, and it was really starting to rewrite that script and, really looking ahead of who do you want to become? What do you want your life to look like? And then writing a letter from your future self and spending time with that. And I just started to, I believe it's really one of our superpowers is the ability to accept an idea and to reject another. And I just began through practice to start accepting new ideas about myself.
And that's the beauty of the self-image, right, Brian? That what Kelly was saying, like, your dad said this all the time, we're never going to outperform our self-image, which basically the definition of that would be, what do you believe to be true about yourself?
Right.
We're never going to go beyond that, but your dad always taught what we can grow and expand the self-image, and he gave practical tools like Kelly's talking about to do that. What's the one thing that you teach around self-image that you'd want our audience to know that would be a caveat to what I just mentioned?
Well, I think the big thing around self-image is you need to take a little bit of time and think, how do I want to show up in the world? How do I want to look at myself? And if you can most people never even take the time to think about that.
Mm-hmm.
If you take the time to think, how do I want to be? How do I want to show up? And write it out, write it down, write out how you are, how you want to be. And then you create an affirmation around that and you repeat it every day or you write it out every day. At first, it might not even seem real. But you keep doing that, eventually it becomes a part of who you are. He always talked, it requires repetition to change anything within ourselves. And if you paint the picture in writing of how you would like to be or how you want to show up, and you read that or write it every single day, you will start to become that person. It maybe sounds a little crazy, a little too simple, but it is that simple. And that's all that is required. I was I was a lot like Kelly. I was always, when I was younger, I was trying to please everybody, and you can't live life that way, because you will never please everybody. It's an impossibility. But if you can start to live a life where you're not worried about what other people think of you, and you're being that best version of you, that's all that really matters. And we can start living from that place. Man, our world is so much
Mm-hmm.
better. We're happier. We're smiling all the time. We're not worried about what other people think because we know we're coming from a right place. And whatever they think, that's their deal. And most of the time, they're really not thinking about us anyway. So,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
it's all good.
I
Yeah.
just had an aha moment when you said that, and I've just got to speak it because I went to a greater depth of awareness with it. The people pleasing is exhausting. And why
Mhm.
is it so exhausting? Because you can never please everyone. And then in the end, you never even are able to please yourself because
Right.
then you feel like this failure that you were not able to please anyone. But I think the biggest thing from doing the work that you were talking about is I have changed the image that how I see myself, and I trust my decisions now. And so the ability to forgive is so much easier because I'm not looking for validation or confirmation from anyone else that this is the right decision.
Well, and part of that is because you're more confident, so you can make those decisions and trust that you're making.
Well,
the right.
that may be, but I think it started with what Brian was saying is I started practicing it. And it wasn't always easy because you tell yourself, I'm not very good at making decisions because I'm trying to please everybody because I didn't even know what I wanted at the time. But through practice and repetition, I'm very confident in making my own decisions now.
So, Brian,
And,
we're talking
and that's
about
exactly where the confidence came from, because you
Yes.
did that. That is exactly.
Yeah, do the thing and the thing will give you the power, right? Something like that.
Exactly.
But right over your right shoulder, Brian, next to your dad's photo is the stick person. So I've had my eye on that. And your dad was one of the stars of the movie The Secret, which was a runaway hit success that I think over 1 billion people have seen now. If you haven't seen The Secret, go check this out. Brian, in a sentence or two, what was and what is The Secret as your dad taught it?
Wow, that's a loaded question right there. What is the secret? So, you know, here's the interesting thing. The secret for me might be a different secret for you, but it's what you resonate and what you need. Um, at the end of the day, here's the secret. And this is something that we have all heard many times. We become what we think about. That's really it. What are you giving energy to? You know, the secret talk that you could attract anything into your life if you focused on it strong enough. And the misunderstanding, most people think that, wow, if I keep wishing for this thing, it'll come into my life. But they're thinking that'll never happen for me. Who am I to think that this could ever
Double-minded
come into
message.
my life?
Yeah,
Yeah,
double-minded
so their
message.
their predominant thinking is it won't happen, but they're
Right.
wishing for this thing. If we can gain, I like to call it a pleasant obsession of what we want, and we're pleasantly obsessed with that, how we want to show up in the world, what we want in our world, what we'd like to do in our world. We have a pleasant obsession around that, no matter how outrageous it is. And that's all we focus on. We don't focus on how it's not happening. We focus on where we are going, live as if we're already there. And then here's the key. What can I do today that's going to get me one step closer to there? And that's all you do.
Yeah.
Most people are waiting for that big thing to happen that their life changes. You know, in my next book, 12 Easy Steps to Change Your Life, the premise of it is this. Most people are waiting for that big thing to happen. And big things do happen once in a while, but most of the time it's because you take care of the little things that the big things happen. And if we have that big dream, that big want, we become what we think about. If our pleasant obsession is where we want to be, and if we take one little step, just one little step every day to get there, it may seem insignificant, but if we take that one little step, do you know, in a year's time, we've done 365 little steps. I promise you, that's going to add up to something big.
Yeah.
That's when you're going to see big results. It comes from the little stuff.
Well,
Stop waiting for that big thing. Take care of the little thing, and those big things will come into your life.
well, is right. And as you know, Brian, like people that are at the elites, that are at the upper echelon, people just think, oh, they're naturally gifted or they're just, powerful in a way that I'm not. But they don't see behind the scenes all the work that this person has done to get there. And
Right.
so, as you said, the majority of the time, it's just not some magic bullet. It's they showed up, they knew what they wanted, they were very passionate about it, and they did things that 97% of the other people just aren't willing to do.
Right.
Kelly we say it all the time. It's not successful people, unsuccessful people, they don't feel like doing something, they just don't do it. Well, I don't
Right.
feel like forgiving, for example. Well, who does? I mean, but successful people don't feel like doing it either, but they know they have to do it.
Right.
And so that's the difference is getting your feelings don't have anything to do with it. It's what do I have to do to be successful? And you move into that action every day. I love what you're saying, inspired action from the goal. But one of the things I want to talk about, the stick person, I have to mention this before we're done, Brian. It's one of the most, it's just something that I hold dear with your dad. And it's the first time I met him. I was sitting there, Kelly and I were in the studio that you're in right now. We flew up to Toronto, getting to know your dad. He was so masterful at asking questions. This went on for a couple hours. And then he said, okay, Robert and Kelly, I'm going to teach you now the one idea, the most valuable idea I learned in 60 years of studying. And he proceeded to go into the stick person. He said, now I'm going to teach you how your conscious and your subconscious mind work together. Well, you know, I had been reading books since I was 25, but I didn't really know it. I just knew of it. But I said, oh yeah, Bob, I think I have a pretty good understanding of how this works too. You know, I've been studying it. And your dad wheeled around and pointed his finger at me and he said, shut your mouth, you don't know. And we won't finish that. But he just told me, and as I sunk down into my chair, my face turned red. And he taught us, you know, he went into it, and I did. He was right. Like, I just knew of it. I didn't understand it, and the way that he taught it. But there's so much power in like that little stick person. Once you realize, as you said, Brian, it's not just the thoughts that pass through; it's the dominant thought that we latch onto. So it's the habitual thought that we're clinging to over time. That, whether we know it or not, that idea is going to move into our subconscious. And as we feed it with emotion, that's the fertilizer, right, into that spiritual seed that's being planted into our subconscious. Whether we know it or not, that's how our outside world is being created. I think the challenge for most people is they just think events and circumstances are randomly showing up. They're not. We're ordering this up, just like our lunch menu, are painting our own picture. Words have power. We send those out. That's why the Bible said when we speak words, they fall to the ground and harden into fact. We have to be very conscious. We have to start thinking about not just what we're thinking about all day long, but the words we're using. And those thoughts are sent out too. Thoughts have power. That's where you're saying we send those out and we attract back on a frequency. So I'm kind of getting going on that. But when I saw the stick person there, that was your dad taught us when he said the single most powerful idea that has changed my world, and I know it has. That the understanding of how that works has changed your life too, Kelly.
Well, you know, at the end of the day, the subconscious mind is the driver of our results. Most people don't realize that. And how do we program our subconscious mind? We program it with what we're thinking. What are we impressing every day with repetition? You know, Kelly and I, we talked about repetition. And most people keep thinking, oh, I can't do this, or this isn't going to happen for me. This isn't working for me. They're wishing for that thing, but they keep impressing the negative. So they keep attracting the negative into their results because that's what they're impressing on their subconscious mind. We have the choice with our consciousness to choose the thoughts that we impress. And if we start to do that, that's when we're going to start to get what we want in this world. And there's a lot of power in that repetition. You want to be careful about what you're thinking and what you're saying. You know, I've often said, would you be friends with somebody that speaks to you the way you talk to yourself? You want to think about that. How do you speak to yourself? That's what you're impressing in your subconscious mind.
I know we usually wrap about a question about forgiveness, and we're going to get there, but I have one more comment and question to you. One of the things that really drew my attention in the book was I had read a quote that your dad would say often to people, that you are likely only one step away from greatness. And I feel like people need to hear that message of hope. But he wasn't just saying that to the most successful person in the room. He was saying that to the person that was stuck and thought, well, you don't know my story. I can't ever get out of this. Why do you think he was saying it to both, and what does it mean to you?
Well, I think he was saying it to both because he lived that as well. You know, most people think my father was this great success his entire life. He had ups and downs like everybody else. You know, we talked about the movie The Secret. Do you know, he was 72 years old when that movie came out. 72. That's when his world exploded. He had been working 40 years previous to that. And it was a struggle. Sometimes it was great, sometimes it was terrible. When that movie came out, that's what got him onto Larry King Live, Ellen DeGeneres, opened his world up to really some big things. Everybody says that big thing. It was because he spent 40 years taking care of the little things, that impressing. That's the trick. We got to focus on what are we impressing, and do we have the perseverance and the persistence that it is one step away, and you don't know when that one step is. That's the thing that's kind of fun. You can just be that one step away. He didn't know in 2006 that he was one step away from this big thing, but he kept taking the steps. He knew that he was going to make it big. He didn't know how, but he knew that if he just kept taking the step, it would show itself. And it did.
I can still hear him. Robert and Kelly, you just need to keep going. Just
Right.
keep going.
Yeah. And the other thing I love that your dad said to me all the time was, you don't know what's going on outside, out there. We think something is bad, or we perceive that things aren't working out the way that we wanted them to. And he'd say, you don't have the luxury to bring that kind of thinking and that kind of energy into this situation. And it always snapped me out of it like that.
Yeah.
So can I
Yeah.
ask you, obviously, like you said, I've been growing up with Bob, and you've been conditioned with a lot of wonderful strategies and tools that you've used all your life. Where do you feel that your relationship with forgiveness is right now, and what does it mean to you?
Well, I've experienced things a lot in my lifetime where I've been harmed by others, and I have, I think because of the way he taught it to me, I've been able to forgive in such a good way, because I will not, I will not allow what something else has happened outside of me, or what somebody else has done, control the way I live my life. There's no good in that. That's not gonna lead me to better things. And I think back to one particular situation of somebody that really hurt me. I was freely willing to forgive them, release them from their stuff and how it affected me. Now, I don't know where they're at, but I do know that that resentment within me would have only harmed me. And I think with that knowledge, being able to release it and just release them to their higher good. That's really what he would tell me to do. Release them to their higher good. They don't even know what they maybe did. It doesn't really matter. But if you can release it and carry on, that's the gold. That's the gold. That's when we start to live. That's when we become free. I see that hourglass behind you. And that hourglass, man, that reminds me of my father. He loved the hourglass. And he said so often people kept living in that sand at the bottom of the glass. The sand had already been done, the harm that was done to them. And they keep reliving that experience, and they keep letting that drag them down. He said, what a shameful place that is to be. It's like you can't change the time you got out of bed this morning. What's happened in the past has happened in the past. He says, all we have is right now, that neck when the sand is just going through. And if we can stand in the present moment, live in the present more often, and what can I do right now? How can I be free? How can I do some good? Live in the present moment. That's true forgiveness, because then the past won't keep repeating in your head, and it won't control how you are, how you act, and how you live. That's the power. It's the present moment.
No, thanks for sharing that. That was awesome, Brian. In your book at the end, you had this quote from William James that said, "The great use of life is to spend it for something that will outlast it." I love that. And your dad exemplified that throughout his life. And now, Brian, you're doing the same thing. So that's
Thank
what's
you.
really cool to see. Where can our audience get your books at, or get in touch with you? Can you let them know your website or the best way to reach
Yeah,
out?
you can go to brianproctor.com. You'll see both books there. You click on the book, it'll take you wherever country you're in, how you can purchase the book, or just simply go to Amazon and search Brian Proctor. You'll find both books there.
Fantastic. Anything
Yeah,
else you can add on?
this was such a pleasure, just getting to kind of step back in time for a second, just to be in the energy of the studio. And I just want to say thank you for your generosity of time. I know that it's going to be a very impactful conversation for our audience.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate you both having me on. It's been wonderful to see you both again.
Likewise, likewise. Well, we're going to wrap up today's audience. We're going to wrap up with Brian. And again, share this episode because there isn't anybody that can't benefit from the wisdom that was shared here today. And if you're looking to transform emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and really lead a life of freedom, come to the Forgiveness Summit May 30th and 31st in Kansas City. You can join in person or virtually. Go to our website at timeforforgiveness.org. You can sign up there, share it with your family and friends. Brian, thanks again. Such a pleasure. Tell Corey hi for us and tell Linda hello for us. And we can't wait to see what's next. I can't wait for your next book as well. So we'll talk to you soon. All right.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Brian.